In math trick number 2, we're going to be looking at adding negatives with positives. So what do I mean by that? So we look at all of the numbers in the world. We have our whole numbers, we have positive numbers and negative numbers. So if we were to draw out a scale, here we have 0, here we would have 1, we would have 2, 3, here we would have -1, here we would have -2, and here we would have -3, so on, negative infinity, and to positive infinity. So when we're looking to add numbers with negatives, we're looking at basically canceling each other out. So when we're looking at 2 plus 2 plus 3 plus 3, when everything's constant are positive, so you don't have to worry about these. We just do the regular addition, which is 5. When we're doing a negative or subtraction, again, we would just look at 1 minus 3. That's a bad example. This would equal -2. What I meant to say was 3 minus 1 equals 2. When we're looking at our negatives here, basically we would take things such as you start off at 1 and then you'd subtract 3. So you'd go 1, 2, 3, and then here's our answer for that example. So this is pretty basic. It's the same thing with negatives. So if you have two negatives, so if I had -3 plus -4, this would equal -7. So how does that work? Let's go into it. So there's the negative rules and the positive rule. So if we have a positive and another positive, this would equal a positive and a negative equals a negative and a positive equals a negative, and a negative and a negative equals a positive. And the way to explain how that rule works is that if you have a +1 times a +1 equals a +1. A +1 times a -1 would equal a -1. -1 times a +1 equals a -1, and a -1 times a -1 equals a +1. Basically, if you have two negatives, they'll cancel each other out. So in this example back over here, we have a positive and a negative, therefore that becomes a negative. So if we go from -3 and we subtract 4, we would keep going -4, -5, -6, -7. So that's how that works. Now, I'm going to give you a trick on calculating basically temperature differences is the best way to look at big fluctuations and jumps. So we'll say that you live in Canada and it is currently -25 degrees outside. You want to go to Florida, and Florida is currently +25 degrees outside. What is the temperature difference between the two? It's actually a very simple way to figure this out. If you have a negative and a positive in this specific instance, you just add the two together. So 25 plus 25 equals 50. There is a 50-degree difference between the two. If you had two negative numbers or two positive numbers, you would subtract the answers, but in this case, you would add the answers. So if it was -20 outside and in, we'll say, Hearst, Northern Ontario, and it was -5 in Toronto, you would look at, well, what's the difference between the two? You would just subtract the two because they're both negative numbers. So it would be -15. Oh, sorry, get rid of that negative. It would be a 15-degree difference between the two. Yeah, so again, with the positives, if it's 30 degrees in Orlando, Florida, and it is 15 degrees in New York City, You want to know what the difference is. You subtract the 2. Because they're both positive, it would be 15 degrees. So yeah, if it's both negatives, you subtract. If they're both positives, you subtract them. And if it's a negative and a positive, you add them together to figure out the difference. So where we use this a lot in the mining world, basically, you would look at something where if you're working at a mine in the middle of winter and it's minus 35 degrees outside and it's super cold, but you go to work underground and it's plus 45, your body was actually going to feel a tremendous difference between temperatures. So again, we have a negative and a positive, so we're going to add these two together. So this would be an 80-degree difference that your body would suffer. That's really big. This is why miners have a really hard time adjusting, especially during the winter. I hope this math trick helped with your negatives and your positives. And leave a comment if you need any more assistance with this.